Texans running from a fight? Well, that's an oxymoron if I ever heard one. Texans don't run from fights. We run to the fight. Like Robert E. Lee once said, the enemy never sees the backs of my Texans. But these Democrats, they aren't really Texans at all to begin with. The liberal media is showering these Texas Democrats with praise for abandoning their state. Meanwhile, they're on a selfie-fueled, beer-soaked, maskless high journey to D.C. to avoid election integrity. To hear these fugitive Democrats tell you that these bills are worse than the Jim Crow era bills that took place. They're worse than 9/11, Watergate, Pearl Harbor, and the Civil War all rolled up into one. But nothing could be further from the truth. The election integrity bills actually increase the amount of hours that you'll be able to vote inside the great state of Texas. What they stop is stop the corruption, stop the scams, stop the stealing of elections. And if you don't think that there was any corruption in the elections, all you have to do is go to the Texas court system. Listening to fugitive Democrats talk, they're fighting for Texans. They're fighting for their constituents.
And I am representing my constituents the best way that I see fit as an elected official in Texas. And
the problem is that fight takes place here in the great state of Texas, not up in D.C. We don't outsource our problems to other states and definitely to the federal government. We take care of our own here in Texas. And when you say that you're representing your constituents and you're representing these Texans, are you talking about the 5,897,394 people that voted for Donald Trump over Biden this last election? Last time I checked, the map looked red as could be here in the great state of Texas. Heck, even the border counties that sit on the Texas-Mexico border, which have voted blue for years and years and almost a decade, flipped over and voted red this last election. Why? Because they can't stomach the liberal agenda. The majority of Texans voted for Donald J. Trump. The majority of Texans rejected creepy Uncle Joe. The majority of Texans voted for conservatism. The majority of Texans voted for liberty. The majority of Texans rejected the liberal ideology here in our state. And to prove that, every single Republican that ran a statewide campaign here in the great state of Texas ended up winning that campaign by 8 to 11%. In a state the size of Texas with the population that we have, that translates into hundreds of thousands of Texans that said, no, we do not want that liberal ideology here in our home. Let me tell you what Texans didn't do. Not one single Texan cast a vote for the corrupt Aunt Pelosi. Not one single Texan cast their vote for crazy Uncle Schumer. That's because we don't subscribe to the liberal agenda down here in the great state of Texas. Yet because you can't push your liberal agenda here in Texas, you take off and run to D.C. to try to bring these politicians who the Texas people did not vote into Texas so that way they can try to push their agenda and push their ideology onto Texans. That doesn't cut it here. Texans don't put up with that kind of nonsense. In fact, if Texans were to vote for Pelosi or Schumer, either one of them, the confession lines at the Catholic Church would be 60 miles long at every single church because Texans would have known that they screwed up and they would have been begging God for forgiveness. So listen up, fugitive Democrats, because I'm going to quote one of your own. Nancy Pelosi said that elections have consequences. And in Texas, the elections are over. The majority of Texans voted for a majority of Republican senators and House representatives. They voted in a Republican governor. They voted in a Republican lieutenant governor. And they voted in a Republican AG. So yes, conservatives and Republicans are going to dictate the agenda for the special session as well as the regular session. That's the consequences you have to face.
How long do you think you'll be here, Representative?
As long as it takes.
You never get that federal legislation that you're waiting for, to look at voting reform at a federal level that would more or less negate everything all these other governors are doing in these dozen plus states. You'd be in Washington a long time.
The problem would be?
The problem is that you got a job to do in Texas. But hey, listen, if you don't want to come back to Texas, that's great. We can do better without one less liberal inside our great state. But you need to resign from your seat so that Texans can actually put somebody in there that will do the will of Texans. Kind of surprised he hasn't added race yet into this conversation.
You know, it took us years to even get to this point where this country had went from people of color not being able to vote to the fact that we were created, all created equal in the eyes of God, but now here we are and we don't have those opportunities.
Oh, there it is, the good old race card. Hell, we're going to have to start calling you Old Raceful. Not Old Faithful, but Old Raceful. Because Jarvis Johnson can't go a few sentences without injecting race into that conversation. Oh, and by the way, Jarvis, guess what? All colors have the right to vote in Texas today. So stop acting like you're back in the Jim Crow era.
All Americans don't want this. Republican, Democrat, white, black, Asian, it doesn't make a difference.
Excuse the hell out of me, Jarvis Johnson, but who the hell are you talking about? This Texan supports the election integrity bills. So stop lying to the media and acting like we don't want this. We want election integrity. It is you and your band of corrupt fugitive Democrats that don't want this. And Texans don't let them lie to you by telling you that they're not costing Texas a dime.
And I have refused my per diem. So some of us are refusing our per diem, and we are working out the details onto that. So we are not here on the taxpayer dime.
They are working out the details to resist that per diem, meaning that the money is still coming in at this point. Secondly, she points out that some of us are resisting our per diem, which means that the entire group is not. There are members up there in D.C. that are taking your taxpayer dollars.